I call this episode 49 Part 2 because I want to reserve the number 50 for when we do the first tour through the interior of the boat, which is coming up real soon. So until then, let's continue with the following. In recent episodes, I showed you how I started welding in various steel angle profiles to build a shelf for our Victron Quattro inverter charger. So far all I did was cutting the steel and welding it in place. So that now we have the finished steel structure of the shelf. Next, I got some plywood plates made out of beech wood. They have a thickness of 21 millimeters and the wood is untreated. Alright then, let's get started. First, I'm gonna cut the plate that sits perpendicular to the rear wall here, and this plate needs to be cut at a 45-degree angle on one side. Luckily, the jigsaw I have can be adjusted exactly in this way. So here we go for the first cut. And I should say that this is the first time I used the jigsaw in this way, so I ended up making a mistake, which forced me to remanufacture this board later on. But for the time being, in order to prepare the other boards, this one will do. Let's see if it fits. Right on. So let's continue with the next board. And after every cut, I sand away the sharp corners. Now this board is very important as it is the one where the inverter charger will later be attached to. This means that whatever system I come up with to attach the boards, it has to be rock solid. But more on that later. Next, I measure the size of the board that's gonna sit here at the rear. And after I put that one in place, I can have a look at the structure so far and think about different options to attach the boards in a rock solid way. For sure, I'm gonna drill some holes into these steel flat profiles and then attach that board with some bolts. Here I can also drill some holes on the top and bottom to attach the board with wood screws. So here I'm drilling the holes into the steel. In some areas I countersink the holes simply by using a 10mm drill to make the bolts head flush with the surface of the steel profile. And after countersinking the remaining of the 4 holes, I trimmed those bolts to the exact needed size. What I intended to do next was to drill the holes through the wood, and I don't quite remember how I thought at that time how the method that I had chosen would lead to a satisfying result, but I ended up making a complete mess out of the board, and in the process I learned a couple of things about working with wood, which I'm gonna share with you now. I learned the first thing right here, and I'm sure you all know what's gonna happen next. That we get a huge breakout around the exit hole. Then using a dull metal drill does not make things much better. Next I try the same thing, but using a smaller drill. But then, when I went back at it with that dull metal drill, it tore up the wood fiber surrounding the hole again, leading to a suboptimal result. At the end of the day, the board looked so bad that I removed it and decided to make a new one. So here we go. First, I cut it to the right size. And then I cut that 45-degree angle one more time, this time paying special attention to not repeat the same mistake. And indeed, this time it was much better. Still far from perfect, but I don't think I can get it any better than this. I have to round off the corners, otherwise the board won't sit flush with the steel. Alright, now this time, in order to drill the holes, at first I only marked their position with a pencil. Then, when I do the drilling, I put a sacrificial board underneath to prevent the wood from breaking out at the exit hole. And see there, this time the exit hole is nice and clean. Next, when I do the countersunk hole, to allow some space for the bolt nut, I use an actual wood drill, which makes for a much cleaner cut, especially when working with relatively soft woods. To finish off, I gently sand the borders of the holes I just drilled. The countersunk holes for the bolts are just big enough so that I can fit a 7mm socket wrench to later tighten the nut. So, with that fixed and my reputation as a craftsman restored, let's firmly bolt down the first board. And there you have it. The first board is in place, and I can safely say that it's a robust construction. Sure, I could use bigger bolts, and I'm certainly gonna add some washers behind the nuts, but from a general point of view, this should be sufficiently robust for the intended purpose. Next, I'll attach the second board. This one won't have any heavy load to carry, so I can get away with just using small wood screws. Of course, I pre-drill the holes to avoid the wood from splitting. Next, it's time to figure out a way how to attach this board. On the right side, I can just directly bolt it to the steel, but on the left side, I have to come up with a clever way how to attach the two boards to each other. Let's first drill the holes on the right side to get that out of the way. And so, what I came up with on the left side is to first drill some 10mm holes into the side of the wood, then add a little bit of wood glue, and then insert a 10mm wood peg, which I'm gonna leave sticking out by a centimeter or so. I then repeat the same for the other two holes. And then this board is pretty much finished, as far as the structural part is concerned. Now, all I have to do is to make 3 10mm holes into the other board. This should be just deep enough for the peg to fit. So let's give it a try. Actually, I need to drill a little deeper. So let's try again. And there you go. So, let's put the boards where they belong to see if everything actually fits once bolted down. Here on the right side, I first put the bolts through the wood and then tighten it with a nut from the other side. And there you have it. I have to admit that I was relieved at this point, because this was a key element that could jeopardize the entire build if done improperly. Now let's put back the third board we have done so far, before moving on with the next boards. Here the one on top should be quick and simple, so let's prepare that one next. And it fits perfectly. Next, I'll do the little floor here at the bottom. Now I can use that board as a template for the two shelves that will sit above it. Whenever I have to cut against the grain of the wood, I trace the cut with a sharp knife to prevent the wood from splintering too much on the side that we're gonna need for the build. I'm gonna use these shelf supports to attach the shelves. After determining the right height, I drill 4 holes and then put in the shelf supports. And then finally the shelf board itself. Now let's do the exact same thing for the second shelf. Here's how I find the right position for the holes to be drilled in the shelf floor. Now we can put the shelves in place. And with that, the shelves are almost finished. I still have to come up with a way to prevent them from doing this, but that's just a small detail. I also need to come up with a way to build a robust base to position our 30 kilo Victron Quattro in this compartment. For now, let's have a look at the result so far. In our next episode, I will show you how I built the base for the inverter charger, how and with what I treat the wood. I'll probably work on the new door frames some more. And maybe we'll continue working on the motor for the latest boat. So until then, take good care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video.